Chapter 19. Jeff was glad to be back at work, even though he took some ribbing for the whole light-duty thing. He knew that the comments were meant to make a bad situation a little better. As long as he took the painkillers religiously and watched out for that one sore spot in the web between his thumb and finger on his right hand, he was okay. In fact, he thought, as he worked a metal maintenance kit across the floor with his foot, he had found ways his body could help that he had never realized were there. "I need that torque wrench," Gabe called from the front of the truck as he worked on the motor in mid-August. "At your service," Jeff said, handing the tool over. "New truck. You would have thought the thing would run for more than a couple of weeks." "Takes a while to break them in," Gabe said. "Kind of like women." Jeff laughed a little at that. "How's Ashley anyway?" "Thrilled. We got an offer to go to New Orleans with her parents over Labor Day weekend." "Well, that's good." "No, it's not. The flight leaves Thursday. We're on shift Friday." "Oh, great." "Yeah, that's what Ash said, except with more colorful language." The wrench clicked on the metal. "So, how's Lisa?" Jeff shrugged. "Good, I guess." The clicking stopped, and Gabe looked over at him. "You guess?" For all he was worth, Jeff wished he could hold Gabe's gaze. This month's been kind of tough on her. Gabe's working slowed. "I can imagine." "She doesn't talk about it much," Jeff said, squinting through the middle of that thought. "How about you?" "What about me?" "Do you talk about it much?" Gabe handed the wrench back. "What's to talk about? I'm okay." He held his hands, which now sported only a couple of Band-Aids, up for inspection. "Getting better every day." Gabe bent back over the fender. "I didn't mean your hands." "She's having enough trouble as it is. She doesn't need my sob story to add to that." "How about someone to lean on?" Gabe asked. "Does she need that?" "She leans on me," Jeff said defensively. When Gabe looked at him, Jeff got the feeling that he could see all the way through him. "That's good, because I know Ashley. She'll drive herself into the ground to take care of things for me, if I let her." "Yeah, well, I think Lisa's hanging in there," Jeff said, although his certainty at the statement waned the moment it was out of his mouth. Gabe nodded. "I'm sure she is." No matter where he ran, Jeff couldn't get those words to leave him alone. How much had Lisa taken care of for him in the last 4 weeks? And he had let her, leaned on her for strength and sanity the whole time. Like a rock, she had stood there, unbending, unbreaking. Yet until that moment, he hadn't really even noticed. Tuesday afternoon, when he woke up, the fact that it was repayment time swelled within him. He owed her, and now it was time to start paying her back. When Jeff stepped into her front office at 4:30, a bag of takeout hot dogs in hand, he put a finger to his lips so that Sherry wouldn't alert Lisa that he was here. Quietly, he stepped to her office door as Sherry stood to stop him, but he put up a hand to warn her off and to shush her protest. The second her gaze dropped to his hand, however, he saw the step she took backward, and he tried to smile at her to assure her he was fine. Her look said she knew better. Without a sound, he turned the knob and cracked the door to Lisa's office. "What? You think this is a joke?" Lisa asked furiously as the phone cord dangled around the back of her chair to the receiver. "Trust me, I am not in the mood to be coming up with jokes at the moment. Now, if you would be so kind as to check your records, I am sure our payment will be documented in your accounts receivable. We sent it on the 10th of June. I don't care if it's not showing up in your computer. I am telling you we sent it. I've got the canceled check right." Her chair spun around, and Jeff's breath caught. She looked at him, and her eyes tilted across the fury. Her hair stuck out in all directions. The circles under her eyes were hard gray lines, and the edges of her skin were sallow and sunken. When had all of that happened? And why hadn't he noticed? Quickly, she bent her head and swiped across her desk. "Here." It's number 1715 for $1,241.19, made out to corporate printing on the 10th of June. It even says what it's for down here, leadership brochures. Yeah, I can fax it. Would that help? Fine, I'll have it there in 2 minutes. What's the number? In a scrawl that looked far too pointy and slanted for her writing, she transferred the number to the yellow pad, which couldn't have been staying on the top of the stack by more than 1/8 of an inch. Yeah, I got it. Okay. The phone hit the cradle, and she stood without so much as acknowledging him. She ripped the paper out of the notebook and the check off the top of her desk and stomped out to the front office. Fax this to corporate printing, now. On her heel, she turned and stalked back into her office and around her desk, where she started sorting through the top layer stacked there. I didn't know you were coming. I didn't either, he said softly. Is this a bad time? Her face was hard. It's always a bad time these days. Then she seemed to remember who she was talking to, and she closed her eyes and took in a long, slow breath. When she opened them again, it took a moment for her to look up from the papers. I'm sorry. Her face had softened in the span of seconds, and even the circles had lightened. Did you need something? I was going to pick up some groceries before I came tonight. I figured you were probably out of milk if you ate cereal this morning. Watching her, his heart asked how he could have been so blind. No, I didn't need groceries. I just wanted to see you. It's been a while since I've been over here. Oh, she said, the act sliding away from her. Well, you should have called. I would have. Her hands dropped to the desk as they moved folders back and forth, fighting to make her world look less chaotic. Slowly, he set the bag in the chair, stepped around the desk, and took her in his arms. I'm so sorry. Even in his arms, he could feel the rigidity of her body, stiff, like iron. Unsettled, she barely returned the hug before backing away from him and swiping at her eyes. That's okay. I just had the office supply place call about the radio spots, and I can't find the Camden report to save my life, and damn it. Her hands slammed the folder they traced across down. I can't do anything right anymore. She reached up to lay a finger on the top of her nose to stop the tears. How can I help? He asked, as helplessness washed over him. The composed look that she finally leveled at him chilled him to the bone. I think this is one I should handle on my own. He felt himself back up. Are you sure? Yeah, she said softly. Don't worry about it. Pulling sanity to her, she shook her head to push the emotion down. I'm sure I can dig out from under this mess somehow. I could... No, Jeff, she said, the iron just under the softness in her voice. I can do it. Oh, okay. His feet backed him around the desk. You going to come to my place tonight? Slowly, she nodded. Yeah, I'll be there. I thought a small can would be enough, Lisa said as she stood at his stove stirring the meat sauce. It's always so hard to tell. Had he not seen the before and after picture? He never would have guessed, he thought, as he leaned against the counter and watched her. Never. Hair perfect, eyes tired but circles gone. No, he never would have guessed how out of control she looked when she wasn't in his company. Somehow, he knew that wasn't a compliment. These companies, they think we don't notice how much they're skimping on the contents of their product. She lifted the can. See, 14.5 ounces. It used to be 16. I did a paper on that in college. She set the can back on the counter. So, how was the station? Busy. That new truck's giving us problems. Already? Her hand reached down and spun the knob to lower the fire as she continued to stir. Didn't you just get that thing? Jeff shrugged. Gabe thinks it's a timing problem. Huh, sounds logical, she said, although he wondered if she had any idea what the term even meant. Somehow, he hadn't noticed how few in-depth questions she asked about the station. A few here and there to keep the conversation going, but nothing beyond that. It was like she didn't want to know anymore. This stuff is like paste. She picked up the spoon and turned it over. The red sauce glopped back into the pan. Quickly, she opened a cabinet and pulled out a measuring cup he didn't remember having. "Could you get me some water?" "Sure," he said, taking the cup from her. He filled it and returned it to the cabinet beside her. It was the first time he had been so close to her in what felt like years. Gently, he put his arms on either side of her arms. "You smell good." "Yeah, like overdone meat sauce." One push at a time, he swayed to one side and then the other. Why had he ever been so reluctant to dance with her? He must have been insane. "What are you doing?" she asked, and he heard the annoyance. "Dancing," he whispered in her ear. "You don't dance, remember?" With one arm, he spun her around. "Oh yeah, I forgot." He tried to bury his head into her shoulder, but she wouldn't stay still long enough for him to accomplish that. "Hey," she pushed him back. "Hello, I was cooking." "What, you don't want to dance with me?" he asked, and the hurt in his chest screamed through his voice. Her eyes closed on the accusation. "I'm sorry. Of course I want to dance with you." As he took her in his arms, he knew something had changed. Their timing was off. Their rhythm was off. They were off. "Want to talk about it?" he finally asked when the space she put between them punched through his heart. "You don't want to," she said, shaking her head miserably. "How do you know that?" She looked at him, and bright tears glinted across her lashes. "The fire stays at the fire, remember?" Her gaze dropped from his. "I'm trying to." His heart broke for the pain he had seen in her eyes. "Come here." With just enough hold on Rational, he reached over and snapped the fire off from under the meal. Then he led her to the couch, sat her down, and laid an arm around her shoulders. "I know this has been tough on you, the burns and keeping me together, and Dustin." The breath she took in seemed to steady her as she sat up and put her elbows on her knees. "That's part of it," she said, nodding as though she was telling herself this lecture. "If you're with a fireman, that's part of it. You just have to learn to deal with it and go on. Dwelling on it doesn't help. Worrying will make you crazy, so you deal with it, however you have to." "That's what you've been doing, huh? Dealing with it?" "I don't have a choice. I love you, so there isn't another option." With that word, his world slammed to a stop. "What did you say?" She looked back at him, but her face was laden with sadness. As she straightened her head and her shoulders, sorrowful determination slipped into her eyes. "Love isn't about when it's easy. That's what Mom used to tell me, but I never really understood that until recently. I watched her, my mom." Lisa nodded at the memory. "When Dad was late for supper and she'd get upset about it but try to act like she wasn't. Yeah, she'd just keep going like it wasn't a problem. And the nights he'd come home too tired to help with us, Mom would feed us supper, help with the homework, run the baths, read the stories, and put us all to bed. I asked her about it once, and she said, 'Lisa, that's just what you do when you love someone. When you really love someone, you can't think about yourself anymore.' I'd never found anyone that meant enough for me to do that before you. Fact, I guess I'd decided it'd just be easier if I didn't. Families, relationships, they just complicate life too much. At least, that's what I used to think before." "You went to a bar and made the mistake of finding someone." "Something like that," she agreed. "At first, I thought Mom was wrong because I felt like it wasn't nearly as hard as she always made it look. I don't know." Lisa sighed softly. "All I know is I want what's best for you, and I'll do whatever I can to make that happen." "And what about you?" Slowly, she shrugged. "I just have to figure out a way to live with it." He slid over beside her. "But I don't want you to have to do that. I don't want you to have to live with it. I want you to be happy too." Her fingers crisscrossed over themselves. "Well, from where I'm at, I don't see how both of us can be happy. You want one thing, I want another. And for you to get what you want, I don't get what I want." The track she was on slid from under his feet. "And if I get what I want, you'll be miserable. What do you want? The question stopped the thread of her words. After a moment, it was with permeating acceptance that she looked at him. Something I could never ask you to do. She shook her head. Don't worry about it, okay? It's just the adjustment. I mean, I was a free spirit. I could come and go as I pleased, do whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. And now I feel like I'm tied to something that I really want to be tied to. But it's taking a while for me to get my life rearranged around it. Although he should have been happy about what she was saying, he couldn't quite get there. She was giving up her life because of him, and somehow he thought that wasn't how it was supposed to work. Suddenly, she stood and straightened her jacket. I've got to finish supper, or it'll be midnight before we eat. He watched the back of her navy skirt walk into the kitchen and around the corner, and never in his life had he wanted to talk to Dustin more. Some rational advice from a friend who really understood would have been really nice right about then, because one thing was for sure, he himself had nothing resembling rational running around anywhere in his brain. This has been To Protect and Serve, Volume 1 of the Courage series. Written by Staci Stallings, narrated by Becky Dowdy. Copyright 2012 by Staci Stallings. Production copyright 2014 by Staci Stallings. This has been a Braveheart Audiobooks production.
You don't want to miss what comes next. Like and subscribe to the Staci Stallings YouTube channel so you never miss a second of the story.